Welcome back, everyone. We're tackling a sport today that's got a truly global following.
We are. And it's a sport with a history as rich and um, as passionate as they come, really.
Right. British football. We're diving deep into British football in this deep dive. But listen, we're going beyond the headlines. This isn't just about who's winning or losing. We're digging into what makes this sport so captivating, so deeply ingrained in the cultural fabric of, well, Britain.
Yeah, and we've got a stack of articles here, a lot of different voices, a real mix that give us a panoramic view, I think, of British football from its humble beginnings to the global powerhouse it is today.
And speaking of beginnings, get this, we're talking way back, medieval times. I mean, can you imagine a football match with hundreds of players, barely any rules?
Oh, yeah. The articles mention these early forms of soak football,
Yeah.
and it sounds like utter chaos. Right. More like a medieval brawl than the beautiful game. Hard to believe it eventually evolved into the structured sport we know today.
Yeah, it really highlights how traditions evolve. You take this chaotic, raw energy, and over centuries, it's refined, codified, shaped into the modern game with its tactics and strategies.
And speaking of shaping the game, there are some key dates, moments that really stand out. 1863, the Football Association's born. They're the rule setters, bringing order to the pitch. Then you've got the FA Cup kicking off in 1871, followed by the Football League in 1888. Big milestones.
Absolutely. These were pivotal moments that standardized the rules, established competitions, and essentially laid the groundwork for the professional game we see today.
And then, boom, 1992 hits, the Premier League's born, and that's when British football goes global. Absolutely, it explodes onto the world stage, attracting massive investment, top talent from across the globe.
But it wasn't just about the game going global, was it? It's about what came back with it, right? New
Ah,
ideas, new styles of play, and suddenly British football, with its deep traditions, is confronted with a whole new way of thinking about the game.
exactly. You had this influx of foreign players and managers bringing in different philosophies, tactics like the possession-based tiki-taka style. And it really challenged the traditional British approach.
And this is where this whole idea of island mentality comes in, right? Like British football, fiercely independent, proud of its history, but maybe a bit resistant to change. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson's reign at Manchester United is a perfect example, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Ferguson, he's a legend, built a dynasty. But his focus was always on grit, determination, the classic British approach, rather than embracing, the more, shall we say, fancy continental tactics.
So, did that hold British football back? Or did it preserve something unique and essential about the game? I mean, it's a question that's still debated today, isn't it?
It is. On one hand, you've got Ferguson's incredible success. His trophies speak for themselves. But on the other, you have to wonder if British teams as a whole had been more open to those outside influences, those new ideas, could they have achieved even more on the world stage?
It's a fascinating question, and it really gets to the heart of this tension that we see throughout British football tradition versus evolution. I mean, think about it. Back in the late 19th century, you had factory workers forming their own teams. Football was an escape from the grind, a source of community, of identity.
Absolutely. It was woven into the very fabric of working class life, providing not just entertainment, but a sense of belonging, of shared purpose.
And even though the games changed, become more global, more commercialized, that connection between the club and its community, that sense of rootedness, it's still palpable, wouldn't you say?
Oh, without a doubt. You see it in the chants, the rituals, the way entire towns, entire cities rally around their teams. It's more than just a game, it's part of their identity.
And we can't forget the economic impact, right? I mean, British football generates billions. The articles even mention potential savings for the National Health Service because, well, playing football is good for your health.
Right. It's a fascinating link, isn't it? You've got the grassroots level, promoting physical activity, building healthier communities, and potentially reducing healthcare costs in the long run.
Okay, that's the upside. But here's the flip side. Ticket prices, they're skyrocketing. So are we pricing out the very fans who built the sport, who've supported their local clubs for generations?
It's a real concern, and it speaks to this larger tension that British football is grappling with. How do you balance tradition with progress, accessibility with commercial success?
Yeah, and it raises another interesting question about British football, this whole notion of gentility. Because let's face it, when you think of British football, gentlemanly conduct isn't exactly the first thing that springs to mind.
Laughing softly. It's an interesting juxtaposition, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got this image of sportsmanship, fair play, but then you've got The raw passion, the fierce rivalries, well, let's be honest, sometimes downright brutal tackles.
Right. So how do we reconcile these two sides? How did this gentlemanly ideal even take root in such a, well, let's call it a physical sport?
Well, you trace it back, organized football in England, it has its roots in the upper classes.
Hmm.
The only adopters, the ones who codified the rules, they were gentlemen amateurs, university students, the aristocracy.
So they brought their posh manners to the pitch with them.
Exactly. The emphasis on fair play, sportsmanship, it was all part of their ethos. And as the game spread to the working class, that code of conduct, it stuck. It became ingrained in the culture of the sport.
Okay, so it's like this weird mix of upper class ideals and working class grit.
Absolutely, and it's fascinating to see how that's played out over time. But here's the thing. As footballs become more global, more influenced by different styles of play, some might say more cynical, more tactical, how does that gentlemanly ideal hold up?
It's a good question. I mean, can you be a gentleman and win at all costs? Is there even room for that kind of sportsmanship in today's hyper-competitive game?
Right. Can British football hold on to that part of its identity as it evolves and adapts to this new global landscape? These are the kinds of questions we'll be wrestling with as we delve deeper into this complex, captivating world of British football.
Absolutely. We'll be right back after a quick break. We're back and ready to tackle some of those legendary British football rivalries.
Oh, we're talking about clashes that go beyond the pitch.
Oh, absolutely.
These are rivalries that are woven into the very fabric of communities and cities.
The history runs deep.
It does.
And it's not just about, who's got the most trophies.
Right.
It's about history, geography, in some cases even religion adding fuel to that fire.
It's true. These rivalries often tap into much deeper cultural and historical currents, making them feel almost mythical in their intensity.
I like that, mythical in their intensity. And speaking of mythical intensity, let's start with a rivalry that's practically a religion in itself, Celtic versus Rangers, the old firm.
I mean, where else do you have a sporting event that needs its own special police unit just to handle the pre- and post-match excitement?
It's unbelievable, the passion surrounding this rivalry. But it really highlights how these clashes go beyond the game itself. We're talking about religious differences, we're talking about political ideologies.
And a complex history.
Complex history that spans over a century.
It's more than just a football match.
Right, it becomes a cultural phenomenon.
Absolutely.
And speaking of cultural phenomena, how about a rivalry that pits two industrial powerhouses against each other?
Oh, you must be talking about Manchester United versus Liverpool.
I am.
Yeah, this rivalry really embodies the history of those cities.
Right.
Their rise as centers of industry.
It's a clash of styles.
Personalities.
Two clubs that have consistently been at the forefront of English football.
Absolutely.
And then you have rivalries where it feels like, local bragging rights for the entire year are on the line.
Oh, yeah.
Take the Tyne-Wear Derby.
Newcastle United versus Sunderland.
Exactly.
Two teams separated by, what is it, like 10 miles?
Yeah, something like that.
But a whole lot of passionate history.
And that geographic proximity, it just adds fuel to the fire, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It becomes this battle for local pride.
Right.
Bragging rights.
And it's not always pretty.
Yeah.
We do have to address the elephant in the room.
The shadow of hooliganism.
Yes.
It's there.
That has, at times, really tarnished the image of British football.
It's a complex issue. There's no doubt about that. And it's got deep roots. The articles here point to a lot of factors that contributed to the rise of hooliganism.
Yeah.
Particularly in those few decades, the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
Social and economic inequality.
Yeah.
Disillusionment amongst certain groups of people.
Even the media's portrayal of it.
Yeah, that played a role.
And it's not just about, brawls in the stands, as awful as those are. We also have to remember tragedies like Heysel and Hillsborough,
Yeah.
which are really etched in the memory of British football.
They were turning points, for sure.
Absolutely.
And they really forced a reckoning within the sport,
Yeah.
And that led to increased security measures,
Right.
stricter penalties for hooliganism.
A real effort to address the root causes. Yep. But for all the passion, and sometimes misplaced passion, British football, it really does have this incredible fan culture
It does.
that sets it apart.
Yeah, it's something truly special, this deep connection to the clubs.
The chants, the rituals, it's amazing.
Generations of families.
Yeah.
Passing down their love for their club, the songs, the ritual.
It's more than just supporting a team.
Oh, absolutely.
It's this living embodiment of being part of something bigger.
A community.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And, Nowhere is that more evident than in those iconic terrace anthems.
Oh, there's something else.
Just picture it. Thousands of voices united in song.
Scarves held high.
The ground's shaking, the passion is
Yeah, it
palpable.
sends chills down your spine.
And you can't talk about British football anthems without mentioning Liverpool's You'll Never Walk Alone.
It's more than just a tune, that one.
Oh, for sure.
It's an anthem. It's a symbol of hope, resilience.
Absolutely the spirit of a city.
It's enough to give anyone goosebumps.
Even the most cynical person gets choked up listening to that.
It's a powerful example of how a song can transcend its musical form and become something much, much greater,
Yes.
It's a rallying cry,
It unites people.
and it speaks to the power of tradition, of shared rituals.
It's incredible. It really is amazing. But as we've been talking about, the sport's changing. You've got these global influences, commercial pressures. It's a whole new ball game. So where does that leave those traditions, that sense of history in this modern era of like billion-dollar transfers and social media fandom?
Yeah, it's a big question, isn't it? Can British football hold on to its soul as it becomes more and more globalized, more commercialized?
Right, because the Premier League, it's arguably the most exciting league in the world now. They're drawing in top talent, fans from everywhere. That's got to be good for the sport, right?
I mean, there's no doubt that the Premier League's global reach has been great for British football financially and in terms of exposure, but it's created some challenges too, like the huge influx of money. It's widened the gap between the top clubs and everyone else.
Making it harder for the smaller clubs to compete.
Exactly, and that could threaten the competitive balance that makes the sport so interesting to watch in the first place.
And what about the whole issue of identity? I mean, can those unique aspects of British football culture, the traditions, the atmosphere, can they survive when they're constantly being compared to global trends, global expectations?
It's a tough one. I mean, the things that make British football so special, the loyalty of the fans, the emphasis on history, the passionate fan culture, they're not easy to just, replicate or export. They're rooted in the history and social fabric of the country.
So, are we saying that British football is doomed to become just another globalized product? Are we going to lose that unique character, that charm?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think there's a way to balance progress with tradition, but it's going to take a real effort from everyone involved. The clubs, they need to remember that connection to their communities, to their roots, and the fans, they need to keep being vocal, keep those traditions alive.
So you think those traditions, that passion, that connection between the club and its community, maybe that's what will actually set British football apart in this increasingly globalized world? It's definitely possible. It's funny, isn't it? In this age of globalization, it's often the things that make us unique, the things that connect us to a specific place and time that really resonate with people.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we've really uncovered in this deep dive, isn't it? British football, it's more than just a game. It's a reflection of society, a tapestry of history and passion, and a love for, well, the beautiful game. And the future of British football, it's still being written. But as long as those fans are in the stands, chanting their hearts out, keeping those traditions alive, British football will be a force to be reckoned with. And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating journey into the heart of a captivating story.